There is a scoreline that Brazil has never recovered from. July 8th, 2014. The Estadio Mineirão in Belo Horizonte. Germany versus Brazil in the World Cup semi-final. On home soil. In front of 58,000 Brazilians, who had come expecting a coronation and were about to witness something else entirely. The 5th minute. Müller heads in from a corner. The 23rd minute. Kroos with a low drive. The 24th minute. Kroos again. 2 goals in 2 minutes. The 26th minute. Khedira makes it 5. 5 goals in 18 minutes. In the Brazilian home stadium. In a World Cup semi-final. With the whole of Brazil watching. It ended 7-1. The images of Brazilian fans in the stands, some weeping, some simply staring, became some of the most shared images in the history of social media. In Brazil, they called it the Mineirazo. 5 days later, Germany beat Argentina 1-0 in the final. Mario Götze, a 22-year-old substitute, controlled a cross with his chest in the 113th minute and volleyed it into the net with his left foot. The first substitute in history to score the winning goal in a World Cup final. But very few people know the full story of what happened to those players after the trophy was lifted, who retired quietly, who walked away at 29, who entered politics, and who is still standing in the Bundesliga dugout building something new. This is the story of Germany, 2014, and this is the answer to the question worth asking. Is anyone still alive? To understand Germany 2014, you first have to understand what German football looked like in the decade before it. Germany had won the World Cup in 1954, 1974, and 1990. But the years between 1990 and the mid-2000s had been a period of relative decline. The 2000 European Championship had produced an embarrassing group stage exit that shocked a country accustomed to winning. The response was systematic and comprehensive. The German Football Association overhauled the entire development structure, investing in youth academies at every Bundesliga club and creating a pipeline that would take a decade to produce results. By 2014, that decade was over, and the results had arrived simultaneously. Coach Joachim Löw had been building this team since 2006. 8 years of careful construction, patient development, and tactical evolution had produced a squad of extraordinary collective quality. Not the most individually gifted Germany had ever assembled, but perhaps the most cohesive. Players who had grown up in the same academies, who had played together since youth level, who understood each other's movement with the automatic fluency that only years of shared experience can produce. Manuel Neuer, the finest goalkeeper on the planet, had redefined the position entirely. Sweeper keeper, playing almost as an 11th outfield player, commanding his penalty area and the space beyond it with a confidence that had no precedent at the highest level. Philipp Lahm captained the side with the quiet authority of a man who had spent his career making the difficult look routine. Mats Hummels and Jerome Boateng in central defense. Toni Kroos in midfield. Efficient, precise, a passing range that required a different vocabulary to adequately describe. And Thomas Müller, the space interpreter. The player who moved into positions that should not exist and scored from them. And Miroslav Klose, 36 years old, in the final tournament of his career, the all-time World Cup record scorer waiting to break his own record one final time. The whole of Germany held its breath, and then breathed out, and Brazil breathed in. Germany won their group with a 4-0 demolition of Portugal. Thomas Müller scored a hat trick. The message was sent before the knockout phase had even begun. Against Algeria in the round of 16, Neuer produced the performance that became the defining individual display of the tournament, coming off his line repeatedly, operating so far from his goal that commentators questioned whether he understood He was the goalkeeper. He did. He simply redefined what goalkeeping could be. Against France in the quarterfinal, Hummels scored the only goal. Germany were through to the semifinal against Brazil, in the Mineirão, but the most dramatic chapter was still ahead. What happened over those 18 minutes in Belo Horizonte exceeded the capacity of normal analysis. Brazil, deprived of Neymar through injury and Thiago Silva through suspension, simply fell apart. Germany pressed, Germany passed, Germany scored and scored and scored again. In the final against Argentina, Götze came on in the second half. In the 113th minute of extra time, Schürrle dribbled past two defenders and crossed inside the box. Götze controlled the ball with his chest and volleyed it into the net. He became the first substitute in history to score the winning goal in a World Cup final. Lahm lifted the trophy. The squad celebrated in the Maracanã while Brazil sat at home and tried to understand what had happened. What happened to the tournament's most unexpected hero surprised everyone who thought they understood Mario Götze's trajectory. He was 22 when he scored that goal. He had already moved from Borussia Dortmund to Bayern Munich the previous summer, announced infamously, while Dortmund were still competing against Bayern in the Champions League semifinal. He arrived at Bayern as the most exciting young German midfielder of his generation. He left 4 years later without fulfilling what the final in Rio had seemed to promise: depression. That was what Götze revealed publicly in 2016. He had been struggling with it since around the time of the World Cup win. The pressure of being the player who had scored the winning goal, the player Love had described as capable of replacing Messi, it had been crushing rather than liberating. He left Bayern and returned to Dortmund. He was diagnosed with a metabolic disorder that affected his energy and his weight. He moved to PSV Eindhoven, rediscovering himself in the Netherlands. He returned to Bundesliga football with Eintracht Frankfurt. He is in his early 30s. He is still playing. The goal that won the World Cup is still the first thing anyone says about him, and he has spent more than a decade trying to find a relationship with that fact that he can live with. No one could have predicted what happened to André Schürrle after the tournament ended. He had made the assist for Götze's goal. He was 23 years old and appeared to have extraordinary possibilities ahead of him. He signed for Wolfsburg, then Dortmund, then Fulham. And then, in 2020, at the age of 29, Schürrle retired from professional football entirely. He cited the loneliness and relentless pressure of professional football. He moved to New York. He pursued art and photography. He spoke about the emptiness he had felt inside a sport that looked perfect from the outside and felt different from within. He is in his early 30s. He is still here. Few people knew what Mesut Özil was going through in the years after the tournament. He had been Germany's creative engine, completing the most passes in the attacking third, creating 17 chances across the tournament. He returned to Arsenal as a World Cup winner and one of the most gifted midfielders of his generation. And then, 4 years later, everything unraveled. A photograph of Özil and his international teammate İlkay Gündoğan with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan before the 2018 World Cup became one of the most politically charged images in German football history. The photograph was used to question Özil's loyalty. When Germany were eliminated in the group stage of Markengrundspiel, Özil became the focus of public anger in a way that drew directly on questions of race and belonging that German football had not fully resolved. He retired from international football in 2018 in a statement that was one of the most powerful documents football had produced in years. He described feeling like a German when Germany won, but an immigrant when Germany lost. The statement was read and discussed far beyond football's normal boundaries. He ended his club career in 2023. He now serves as a board member of a Turkish political party, owns shares in a Mexican football club, and runs several business ventures. He is in his mid-30s. The wound his retirement opened has never fully closed in German football. His absence from the 2018 tournament, and the manner of it, remains one of the most examined chapters in the sport's recent cultural history. 12 years after the Maracanã, the men who lifted that trophy have followed paths as varied as the modern game allows. Manuel Neuer retired from international duty after Euro 2024 and signed a further contract extension at Bayern Munich through summer 2026. He is in his late 30s and still playing professional football at the highest level. Thomas Müller's 25-year association with Bayern ended in summer 2025. He joined MLS side Vancouver Whitecaps, helping them reach the MLS Cup in his debut season. He is in his mid-30s. He is still playing football, which is the most Thomas Müller thing imaginable. Toni Kroos retired from Real Madrid in 2024 after winning his 6th Champions League title. He had already retired from international football, then came back for Euro 2024, then retired again. He is 35 years old. He is genuinely done. Miroslav Klose, the World Cup's all-time top scorer with 16 goals, is now the head coach of 2 Bundesliga side FC Nuremberg, with a contract through 2028. The man who broke Ronaldo's record in the Mineirão semifinal is still in the game, rebuilding from the ground up. Philipp Lahm retired from football in 2017 on his own terms, with the composure of a man who had decided exactly when to leave. He organized the 2024 European Championship in Germany as tournament director, performing that role with the same quiet efficiency he brought to everything. He is in his early 40s. Bastian Schweinsteiger retired from playing in 2019 after a final season with Chicago Fire. He works as a television analyst for German broadcaster ARD, appearing on major tournament coverage with the directness of a man who has said what he thinks his entire career and has no intention of stopping. Mats Hummels retired from Borussia Dortmund in 2024, had a final season at AS Roma, and stepped away from playing. He is in his mid-30s. The tournament may have ended, but their legacy still lives in football history. Germany 2014 is remembered for 2 things above all others: the 7-1 and the goal. The 7-1 because it produced the most dramatic single result in the tournament's 90-year history: 5 goals in 18 minutes on home soil against the hosts in a World Cup semi-final. The goal because it was scored by a 22-year-old substitute in the 113th minute of a World Cup final, who then spent the next decade managing the weight of that single moment. What love built over 8 years became the template German football tried to replicate in the decade that followed, with limited success. The 2018 World Cup produced a catastrophic group stage exit. The 2022 tournament produced another. Germany hosted Euro 2024 and were eliminated in the quarterfinals. The generation that had won in Brazil was not simply a product of a system. It was a coincidence of talent and timing that the system could develop but not guarantee would recur. Müller in Vancouver, Klose in the Nuremberg dugout, Kroos in retirement, Götze still playing, still managing his relationship with the goal that defined him before he was old enough to define himself. Schürrle in New York, making art. Ozil in politics. The squad that humiliated Brazil 7-1 and won the final 12 days later has scattered across football and beyond it in ways that reflect the full complexity of what it means to peak at 22, at 36, at 23, in the most public arena the sport provides. For one unforgettable summer in Brazil, Germany showed the world what a generation built over a decade could produce when it all came together at exactly the right moment. The Mineirão still stands. The trophy is in a cabinet in Germany, and Mario Götze's left foot is still somewhere in Frankfurt, carrying the memory of a moment that will never entirely leave it. Nor should it.